Menendez Brothers Reddit discussions.
Part 2.
What is one thing you have a gut feeling about in this case, yet no proof of?
I think the family members knew a lot more than what they have let on.
Oh, totally. 30-plus families members immediately taking the side of the people who blew their relatives' brains out. That's bonkers, and says to me that they bare minimum had suspicions.
I agree. I think guilt plays a huge role in why the family supported them so much during the trials and continues to support them now.
Poor Diane and Alan torturing themselves with guilt for decades, and meanwhile, I'm like you two and Andy are the only ones with nothing to feel guilty for. You were children. You tried.
On the Oziel tape, Lyle says, "My relatives knew." And I'm like, how much did they know? About what exactly?
I think at least one adult in the family may have had a strong suspicion about sexual abuse, or had possibly been told. The cousins who testify about the sexual abuse most directly were teens at the time they were exposed to indicators. And there's obviously not as much shame associated with being a child and not reporting anything compared to an adult.
I think Jose was setting up Eric to look mentally unstable had he ever tried to leave as an adult. He had Oziel on his side, he could set up a few phone calls, get Eric in a psych ward and a conservatorship, like Brittany.
Jose did more than just show Andy Cano porn.
I have wondered if Lyle got rid of the guns. They were never found, were they? And he said he went back to look once, if I recall correctly.
Another one. The thing with the maid was shady as fuck. I wholeheartedly believe she lied and was told to do so by the prosecution. The judge shut down any questions about her immigration status. Maids of shady wealthy families never hear anything, don't you know?
I really believe there were / more pictures, and maybe even videos, that were never uncovered of the SA. Specifically, pictures of Eric that might have been taken well into his teen years, since the abuse was still happening, and he destroyed them after the murders. I have nothing to back this up with, it's just a sick feeling.
I think a lot of us wonder about Eric's involvement that night. Aside from the blood on his clothes, it would be understandable too on his part given what he went through. Plus, Eric had been dreaming of this for quite some time, while Lyle was initially very hesitant and had to be convinced to go through with it.
Eric is the more aggressive brother.
Yes. I 100 points believe this too. I believe he is also manipulative. Just watching Lyle on the stand is heartbreaking. I don't feel that way when watching Eric on the stand.
Yes, totally. Not to agree with the prosecution, but I buy their theory that Eric persuaded Lyle, and I feel like he may have exaggerated some things to get things going / done.
Eric isn't as demure and innocent as he comes off. Maybe now but definitely at the time his before trial vibe and witness stand vibe were totally different. Lyle seems less like he's embellishing on the stand than Eric. I go back and forth thinking Eric was more of the mastermind of the entire thing. Unfortunately, I have the same feeling about Eric's testimony.
Eric is the primary reason they committed the murders, and Lyle, as usual, is taking the blame. Meanwhile, Leslie tries to throw him under the bus the entire trial.
I disagree, but I guess we all see what we want to see. It's an exaggeration to say that she threw Lyle under the bus the entire trial. She drew some clear distinctions between the brothers in her closing in front of Eric's jury. Only Lyle's jury was not present. But nothing she said would have impacted Lyle's sentence whatsoever, as they had completely different people deciding their individual fates who weren't privy to viewing the entire trial like the court TV audience were at home.
Not the entire trial, but she threw subtle jabs at him consistently. I admire that Leslie cares for Eric, but I personally found it unprofessional and unnecessary.
I agree with you. Eric had Leslie, who was the lead lawyer, and she seemed to get attached to him. Ick. I'm not sure if she was faking it or not, but she's the reason Lyle ended up taking all the blame, publicly. I watched some of the hearings, and honestly, the theories the prosecutors tried to bring against Eric were scary. If they had succeeded, I really think he might have gotten the death penalty because they made him look like the mastermind.
You're correct. I believe that's why Lyle felt compelled to share the blame, because if he didn't, there's a strong chance Eric would have gotten the gas chamber. It does frustrate me, however, That Lyle has taken on so much undeserved public scrutiny when in reality Eric actually was the mastermind. Lyle has people-pleaser tendencies, and as a fellow one I am frustrated on his behalf sometimes. Lol.
Collusion between Kahn and Weisberg. Jose molested Ricky Martin.
Not completely related, but I think Tammy is 100% an opportunist and doesn't want Eric out.
Kitty's sexual abuse of Lyle might have been initiated by him, and towards the end it involved intercourse. Both brothers wanted their parents dead, even if I believe that the shootings as they happened weren't planned. I believe Lyle regrets the fact him and him brother are in prison for life more than he regrets the crime itself.
I don't think it was initiated by Lyle. But I will say that I believe it was much more than just him touching her. Obviously, it goes without saying that that is totally vile anyway. He said to Abnorma that there are things he will not and cannot speak about, and I believe him.
I also wonder if there are videotapes of the boys' grapes that the boys were not able to get rid of, somewhere out there getting dust. But as for other gut feelings with no evidence whatsoever, I have a feeling that José's essay of Lyle didn't end at 8, but resumed at a later age. Lyle, in his mind, isn't lying that it stopped at 8. The problem is that Lyle equates essay with what he thinks mutual is, hence why Kitty was mutual and not essay for him. I wonder why Lyle assumed José would stop Eric's essay just because Lyle talked to him at 13. I wonder if they had an exchange of sorts, with José suggesting one brother in exchange for another. That is José's MO, after all, to negotiate and get a win-win deal for himself. Dr. Conti more or less says the same thing. With what he knows of José, why would José stop Lyle's essay? A pact or bargain between two men. A man makes decisions and keeps his promises. A boy doesn't type of conversation. A mutual understanding between them. This would resolve why Conte believes Lyle's essay continued past 8, without contradicting Lyle's assertion that it did stop at 8, and why Jose was adamant that Lyle never find out that Eric's essay was ongoing, and why Lyle assumed it had stopped because a mutual pact was made between men. It would also answer why Lyle was so shocked it still continued with Eric, and why he wondered if Eric was complicit, just as he was. It would also fit Lyle's outrage that Jose broke their pact. This has no basis on evidence whatsoever, just a gut feeling I have, so take it with a grain of salt.
Lyle did call it the Devil's Pact or something like that, and he sounded really angry when he spoke about it, saying he kept his end of the deal and Jose didn't. Wow. Your theory really messed with me now.
There was full intercourse between Lyle and Kitty, and he enjoyed it physically. His body reacted to it. That is why he sees it as mutual and is so ashamed and will not talk about it.
It is. It makes me sick to even imagine it. Doing those things with and to your own mother. And to enjoy it physically. He wanted to do it because it was the only time his mother was nice to him and kissed him. That probably messed up with Lyle mentally. I fully get why Lyle did not want to offer any details about that.
The fact he even argued with Pam about it being mutual is insane, and he never brings it up on interviews even nowadays.
I was about to comment this. It's why he dismissed Pam saying that his mom molested him. He didn't see it as molestation.
Lyle's abuse was pretty horrendous when you take into account everything that happened to him since he was a child. The sexual abuse from both parents stopped at 14 from what we know. And then there was the physical and emotional abuse that continued.
Here are some things that I believe. Lyle's abuse went on for far longer than he was comfortable in saying. I believe that Dr. Conti alluded to that. I believe that he and Kitty were in a sexual relationship, and I also believe that Jose was involved. Since Lyle said he and Kitty would lie in bed and touch each other, the brothers probably had some sort of sexual relationship with each other. Not a porny way, but as a humiliation ritual by Jose in the shower. The family knew a lot more about the abuse, but stayed silent. Like Martin not revealing how her mother abused Jose. That should have come out in the trial. Jose was definitely involved in some kind of pedo-ring, which is why I believe that the brothers have been prosecuted so heavily. They want to keep them silent. Also, Jose has many other victims, including Ricky Martin, but they're being blackmailed. One more thing to add, that the fight between Kitty and Lyle that resulted in the toupee being ripped off was about the abuse. Lyle's been cagey about the details, but that's what I believe.
They felt entitled to their parents' money for the abuse they suffered, and that fueled their actions. Ultimately, they murdered their parents for both money and retaliation.